Get out!
Revenge Files with Nora. File 5, Brittany. The SEC investigator slid the folder across the table. Inside, 3 years of hidden accounts, $47 million in embezzlement, and the CFO's signature on every single page. They fired me for asking too many questions, called it redundancy. Said my position was being eliminated as part of a restructuring initiative. What that really meant was that I had become a threat to them. What they didn't know, I'd already copied the audit trail. Every fake expense report, every double billing scheme, every offshore transfer they thought was buried. Carter Holbrook thought he was untouchable. He thought firing me mid-investigation would make the evidence disappear. He was wrong. By the time federal agents walked into Stratford Capital's lobby, I wasn't just a former employee. I was the whistleblower who brought down a $47 million fraud. Here's how I exposed the biggest financial crime in the company's history. This is the story of how an ordinary accountant uncovered it all. The morning it all started, Manhattan smelled like hot garbage and ambition. That particular mix of subway exhaust, car fumes from the streets, and that special hopelessness that can only be felt in New York in August. I'd been walking these same streets for 7 years, but that day I felt something different. There was something electric in the air. Something was about to explode. I joined Stratford Capital Partners 7 years ago, fresh off a forensic accounting certification, hungry to prove myself in Manhattan's cutthroat financial district, naive enough to believe I was joining a fair game. The company managed $2.8 billion in assets, private equity, institutional investments, pension funds from 3 different states. Serious money. Serious responsibility. The kind of money that made people nervous. The kind that attracted regulators like sharks to blood. I'd seen smaller firms crumble under the weight of half this portfolio. Stratford had survived because someone was always watching the numbers. That someone was me. My role was simple on paper, senior financial controller. In practice, I was the person who made sure the numbers told the truth. Quarterly audits, compliance reviews, regulatory filings. The unglamorous, even boring, you could say work that kept the SEC off our backs and the clients confident. For 5 years, I was good at my job, maybe too good. I discovered discrepancies that others missed. I flagged transactions that didn't make sense. I created spreadsheets to track money flows across 16 different accounts. My colleagues called me too meticulous. The CFO, Carter Holbrook, also called me too meticulous. What I didn't realize was that this was exactly why I was the person he feared. Carter had been with Stratford since the beginning, one of the original partners, the kind of man who wore $4,000 suits and spoke in carefully measured sentences. Silver hair, sharp jaw, the polished confidence of someone who'd never been questioned in his life. He reported directly to Preston Ashworth, the CEO and founder. They'd built Stratford together nearly 3 decades ago, back when private equity was still the wild west of finance. 2 college roommates who'd turned a small investment fund into a multi-billion-dollar operation. Everyone trusted Carter. The board trusted Carter. The clients trusted Carter. I trusted Carter too. At first. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment that trust began to crack, but at the time I explained it away, rationalized it, told myself I was being paranoid, that forensic accountants see fraud everywhere because that's what we're trained to find. I was wrong. Not about the fraud, about my own hesitation to act. My apartment in Park Slope was a 4th-floor walk-up with creaky hardwood floors and a view of the brownstones across the street. I'd lived there for 6 years. It wasn't much, a small 1-bedroom with a kitchen that barely fit 2 people, but it was mine. The rent was reasonable by Brooklyn standards, and I liked the neighborhood. Tree-lined streets, good restaurants. The kind of place where people actually said hello on the sidewalk. It made me feel like I had a life beyond the numbers. Every morning, same routine, coffee from the corner bodega, subway to Wall Street desk by 8:15. I was the first one in most days. I liked the quiet, liked having time to review the overnight reports before the chaos started. My desk was minimal. Laptop, 2 monitors, a plant with striped green leaves whose name I didn't even know, a gift from my sister that somehow stayed alive despite my neglect. The only personal item, A framed photo from my forensic accounting certification ceremony. My parents beaming, me holding the certificate like a trophy. They were so proud. Immigrant parents who'd worked double shifts so their daughter could become a professional. Someone who sat in an office instead of cleaning one. I thought about them a lot in those early months at Stratford. Thought about what they'd sacrificed. Thought about what I owed them. Maybe that's why I stayed so long, because I couldn't bear to see my mother's worried eyes. Maybe that's why I kept hoping the discrepancies were innocent mistakes that would resolve themselves. But they weren't mistakes. And they weren't innocent. Part of me knew from the beginning, that small voice in the back of my head that whispered, "Something's not right," every time Carter dismissed my questions a little too quickly. Every time a reconciliation came back with numbers that were just slightly too perfect. I ignored that voice for too long. We all do. It's easier to believe in the system than to accept that the system is broken. The first crack appeared 2 years ago, a routine quarterly review. I was reconciling expense reports from the London office when something didn't match. A vendor payment, $340,000 to a consulting firm called Callaway Strategic Partners. Standard enough. Except when I pulled the contract, the service description was vague. Strategic consultation and market analysis. I'd seen that phrase before, on 6 other invoices. Different vendors, different amounts, same generic language. The addresses were strange too. When I Googled Callaway Strategic, the website was barely functional. Stock photos, no team page, no client testimonials, no phone number that actually connected. The kind of site you build in an afternoon and never update. I flagged it in my report. Carter reviewed it, nodded and said he'd look into it personally. I watched his face as he read my analysis, looking for something, a flicker of concern, a tell. Anything that would confirm my suspicions. His expression never changed, polished, professional. The kind of calm that comes from years of practice hiding things. "I'm sure there's an explanation," he said. "These international payments can be complex. I'll follow up with the London team." I nodded. What else could I do? Nothing happened. 3 months later, the same pattern. Different vendor name, Crestview Strategic Partners. Same vague services. Same round numbers that felt too clean. Same ghost website with the same stock photos, probably purchased from the same template. If you've ever stumbled upon something that just didn't add up, you know exactly how unsettling that feeling can be. I flagged it again. This time, Carter called me into his office. The door closed with a soft click. He sat behind his mahogany desk, hands folded, expression unreadable. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows overlook the financial district, the corner office, the power seat. "Brittany," he said my name slowly, "I appreciate your diligence, but you need to understand something about this industry." I waited. Not every transaction fits into neat categories. Sometimes partnerships require flexibility, discretion. He leaned forward. "I'm asking you to trust the process." Translation, stop asking questions. Have you ever been told to stop asking questions when you knew something was wrong? I nodded, said I understood, walked back to my desk, but I didn't stop. I just got quieter. That night, I started a private folder on my personal laptop. No company servers, no cloud backups they could access. Just a local drive, encrypted, invisible. I routed all my research through NordVPN. If Stratford's IT team ever tried to trace my personal browsing, they'd hit nothing but dead ends in Panama. I called it insurance, not because I was planning anything dramatic. Not yet. I just wanted to understand, wanted to know if I was crazy or if something genuinely wrong was happening under everyone's noses. Every night after work, I'd spend an hour tracing transactions, cross-referencing invoices with vendor registrations, building a timeline that only I could see. My social life, which was already barely visible even with a magnifying glass, evaporated completely. Weekends disappeared into spreadsheets. My sister started asking if I was okay. I told her I was fine, working on a project. I wasn't fine. I was obsessed. Let me show you what I mean. Over the next 18 months, I documented everything. 18 full months. The time it takes for 2 babies to develop in the womb. I patiently nurtured the documents instead. Vendor payments that led to shell companies. Expense reports with fabricated receipts. Wire transfers to offshore accounts in the Caymans and Luxembourg. I spent weekends tracing corporate registrations. Callaway Strategic was registered to an address in Delaware. The registered agent was another LLC. That LLC was owned by a holding company in Nevada, and that holding company traced back to an account Carter controlled personally. The pattern was elegant in its simplicity. Create fake consulting contracts, route payments through multiple intermediaries, skim a percentage into personal accounts. Repeat, Carter wasn't stealing in obvious ways. No missing cash from the vault, no forged checks. He was billing the company for services that didn't exist, then collecting the payments himself through a web of LLC tickets. The total, when I finally calculated it, $47 million over 3 years. I remember the exact moment I hit that number. Sitting at my kitchen table at 2 a.m., spreadsheets glowing on my laptop, the realization hitting me like cold water. 47 million. Money stolen from pension funds, teachers' retirement funds, firefighters' savings, real people who worked their entire lives to earn this money, and Carter used it to buy vacation homes in the Hamptons, to finance his children's trust funds, to maintain a lifestyle built on theft. I sat there for an hour just staring at the screen, wondering how someone could do this, wondering how he slept at night. I had the evidence. Invoices, bank records, corporate filings, a trail so clear even a first-year auditor could follow it. What I didn't have was a plan. Going to Preston, the CEO, seemed logical, but Preston and Carter had been partners for 30 years. They vacationed together in the Hamptons. Their wives organized charity galas. Their kids went to the same private schools. Accusing Carter meant accusing the foundation of the company itself. Going to the board meant going through Carter's allies. Half the directors owed their positions to his recommendations. The other half were too afraid of rocking the boat. And going to the SEC, that meant becoming a whistleblower. That meant lawyers, investigations, retaliation. That meant risking everything I'd built, so I waited. Gathered more evidence. Built my case until it was airtight, but Carter didn't wait. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, 8:47 a.m. Subject line, organizational update. I read the first paragraph and felt my stomach drop. Following a comprehensive review of operational efficiency, we are restructuring several key departments. Your position, Senior Financial Controller, has been identified as redundant. Your employment with Stratford Capital Partners is terminated effective immediately. No meeting, no warning, no severance negotiation. Just a sterile corporate execution, delivered while I was still holding my morning coffee. The second paragraph was worse. Please return all company property, including laptops, access badges, and any materials related to your work. A security escort will accompany you to collect your belongings. Security escort. Like I was a criminal, I sat at my desk for a full minute, staring at the screen. Around me, the office hummed with its usual Tuesday energy. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the coffee machine gurgling in the break room. Someone laughed at a joke I couldn't hear. No one knew yet. No one had any idea that my world had just collapsed in 200 words of corporate boilerplate. Then the door opened and Carter walked in. He was flanked by 2 security guards, young guys in blazers trying to look professional. They wouldn't meet my eyes. Brittany. Carter's voice was smooth, almost sympathetic. It felt more unsettling to me. I'm sorry it came to this. If you'll gather your personal effects, these gentlemen will escort you out. I looked at him. I really looked. The silver hair, the expensive suit, the careful neutrality in his eyes that didn't quite hide the satisfaction underneath. He knew. He knew I'd been digging. This wasn't a restructuring. This was silencing. Can I ask why? I kept my voice steady. It's simply an operational decision. He spread his hands. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. The phrase people use when it's entirely personal. I stood. Picked up my bag, left my coffee on the desk, still steaming. The walk to the elevator felt longer than it should have, or maybe time slowed down, past the trading floor, past the conference rooms where I'd presented hundreds of reports, past the corner office where Carter had told me to trust the process. At the elevator, one of the security guards pressed the lobby button. The doors closed, and Carter Holbrook smiled. Just briefly, just enough for me to see, he thought he'd won. There was satisfaction in his eyes. The corners of his mouth were slightly curved upward. He looked at me the way you look at something you've finally managed to throw away. As if this was something very familiar, something he was very used to doing. Kicking a small stone off the road and moving on. I was that small stone. I still remember what I felt at that moment. It wasn't a familiar feeling like pure anger or hatred. I didn't feel like poor me either. There was just a certainty inside me that something had to change. It definitely had to change, but I also knew that this could only happen with patience. Carter had just made the biggest mistake of his career, and he had no idea. Maybe I'm not as small a stone as he thought, I thought to myself, because there was something important he didn't know. My laptop had already gone home. The insurance folder had been updated that morning, and a copy of every document was sitting on an encrypted drive in my apartment. He'd fired the investigator, but he hadn't destroyed the investigation. The subway ride home felt surreal. Rush hour crowd pressing against me, briefcases and backpacks, the usual Tuesday commute. Everyone heading somewhere with purpose. I was heading nowhere. For the first time in 7 years, I had no office to return to. The F train was packed. I stood pressed against the door, watching my reflection in the dark window as we passed through tunnels. The woman in the reflection looked calm, composed, professional. She was falling apart inside. A woman who didn't know where she was drifting, with no solid ground left to stand on. Have you ever felt that way? I kept replaying the moment. Carter's words, "Your position has been identified as redundant," the security guards flanking him, the walk to the elevator, his smile. My apartment in Park Slope was quiet. Late morning light filtered through the windows. I sat on the couch, still in my work clothes, and let the silence settle. 7 years. I'd given them 7 years of meticulous work, late nights, weekend audits. I'd caught errors that saved them millions. I'd built compliance systems they still used. I'd protected them from regulatory fines at least 3 times, and they'd erased me with a form email. The anger came slowly at first. A cold burn in my chest that spread outward, not explosive, not loud, just steady. Calculating. Carter thought he was clever. Fire the forensic accountant, eliminate the threat, clean and simple. But he'd made a critical mistake. He thought I was loyal to the company. I wasn't. I was loyal to the truth. I had just been under the illusion that they were too. I pulled out my personal laptop. Opened the insurance folder. Every document was there. Every invoice. Every bank transfer, every shell company registration. The evidence didn't care that I'd been fired. The numbers didn't change because my access was revoked. The fraud was still fraud whether I had a badge or not. That night I made a decision. I could walk away. Take the severance, whatever they offered, sign an NDA and move on. Plenty of forensic accountants did exactly that. Don't make waves. Don't burn bridges, protect your reputation, or I could do what I'd been trained to do, follow the evidence wherever it led. I chose the evidence. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I was angry, though of course I was. I chose this because somewhere in my head, I could hear my father's voice, the one he used when he talked about integrity, the one when he talked about doing the right thing no matter the cost. They came here with nothing, he used to say about my grandparents, built everything by being honest. Carter had built everything by lying. Someone had to stop him. That someone was going to be me. My sister called that evening. She'd seen something on LinkedIn. Someone from Stratford posted about restructuring. "You okay?" Her voice was careful. "I'm fine." I said it automatically. "Brittany." I paused. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken things. "I found something," I said finally. "At work, something bad." "How bad?" $47 million bad. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What are you going to do?" "The right thing." "Please be careful," she said. The next morning, I called a number I'd saved months ago, a contact at a law firm specializing in whistleblower cases. We'd met at an industry conference. She'd given me her card and said, "If you ever find something that needs seeing, call me." Adrienne Foster answered on the 3rd ring. "Brittany." Her voice was warm but measured. "I had a feeling I'd hear from you eventually." "How did you know?" She laughed softly. "Forensic accountants don't keep business cards for fun. They keep them because they see things. And the ones who see things eventually need to talk." She was right. I'd been carrying her card in my wallet for 8 months. Looking at it sometimes when the weight of what I knew felt too heavy. Wondering if I had the courage to use it. Now I did. I told her everything. The fake vendors, the shell companies, the $47 million, the firing. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You have documentation, everything. Time-stamped, backed up 3 ways. Another pause, then, how soon can you come to my office? 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Adrian in a conference room overlooking Midtown. The folder I'd brought was thick. 3 years of evidence, organized by date and transaction type. She reviewed it methodically, page by page. Her expression didn't change, but I noticed her posture shift. She sat up straighter, leaned in closer. This is comprehensive. She finally looked up. Almost too comprehensive. I've been documenting for 18 months. Before they fired you. Long before. Adrian nodded slowly. That's good. That's very good, because what you're describing isn't just corporate fraud, it's securities fraud, wire fraud, potentially RICO violations if we can prove pattern of enterprise. I felt the weight of those words. Federal charges. Real consequences. I understood better the gravity of the situation I had somehow become part of. What happens now? Now we go to the SEC? She closed the folder. You become a whistleblower. I froze for a moment. The word hung in the air between us, whistleblower. It sounded noble in movies. In real life, it meant targets on your back, subpoenas, depositions, years of your life consumed by legal proceedings. But it also meant justice. It meant accountability. It meant Carter Holbrook facing consequences for what he'd done. Have you ever had to make a choice like this? I took a deep breath and said, I'm ready. I said it before I could second-guess myself. Adrian smiled. Good. Because once we file, there's no going back. I thought about Carter's smug smile at the elevator. The security guards flanking him like a king with his guards. The way he'd said, nothing personal while personally destroying my career. I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. Adrian pulled out a pen. Then let's start with the timeline. What Carter didn't understand was this: I wasn't just a controller. I was a forensic accountant. My entire career was built on finding patterns others missed, on following threads until they led somewhere. He thought firing me would end the investigation. Instead, it gave me something I hadn't had before: time and motivation. And now, the SEC was about to get a very detailed presentation on exactly how Stratford Capital's CFO had been stealing from his own company for 3 years. They wanted to see the documents. They wanted to interview witnesses. They wanted to follow the money. I was ready to show them exactly where it went. The SEC building in Lower Manhattan looked unremarkable from outside. Glass and steel like every other government office. No drama in the architecture. But inside, the investigation was anything but routine. Anthony Mercer was the lead investigator assigned to my case. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, the kind of patient intensity that made you want to tell the truth even when lying would be easier. He'd spent 20 years in regulatory enforcement. He'd seen every scheme, every excuse, every attempt at obstruction. He'd never seen a whistleblower walk in with this much documentation. Miss McCarthy. He spread the files across the conference table. You've given us 3 years of transactions, shell company registrations, and bank records, all organized by date. I nodded. Most whistleblowers come to us with suspicions. You came with a prosecution package. I'm a forensic accountant. This is what I do. He smiled slightly. What made you start documenting? I told him about the first invoice. Callaway Strategic, the vague service description, the ghost website, and you kept documenting for 18 months before reporting. I wanted to be sure. I wanted the case to be airtight. Anthony was clearly impressed. He leaned back. It is. We've already started tracing the accounts. Your shell company analysis was accurate. Every LLC leads back to Carter Holbrook. I felt something shift in my chest. Validation. After 18 months of quiet investigation, someone was finally confirming what I'd found. What happens now? Now we bring him in. The next 2 weeks were a blur of depositions, document reviews, and strategy sessions. Adrian handled the legal complexities. Anthony and his team handled the investigation. I answered questions, explained spreadsheets, and walked them through every transaction. Meanwhile, at Stratford Capital, chaos was beginning to spread. I heard about it through a former colleague, someone who'd reached out after seeing my LinkedIn update. She'd sent a careful text. Things are weird here. Auditors showed up yesterday. Carter's been in his office with the door closed for 3 days. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The investigation was moving forward. Carter's world was about to collapse. He just didn't know it yet. The morning the federal agents arrived at Stratford Capitol, I was sitting in Adrian's conference room with a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. 9:15 a.m. Anthony had told me approximately when it would happen. Coordinated action across 3 jurisdictions. Agents at the New York office. Agents at Carter's home in Connecticut. Agents at the Delaware registered agent's address. By 9:30, Adrian's phone buzzed. She read the message, then looked up at me. It's done. He's been detained. I exhaled. Didn't realize I'd been holding my breath. It didn't feel real. I felt like I was reading a line from a movie. How long until? Arraignment is tomorrow. Charges include securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and obstruction. The U.S. attorney is handling it personally. I thought about Carter in handcuffs. Carter in an orange jumpsuit. Carter realizing that the forensic accountant he'd dismissed had just ended his career. Nothing personal, I murmured. Adrian raised an eyebrow, something he said to me once, when he fired me. The news broke that afternoon. Financial Times first, then Wall Street Journal, then everyone else. Stratford Capitol CFO arrested in $47 million fraud scheme. The headlines all mentioned the same thing. The case was built on evidence provided by a whistleblower. They didn't name me, not yet, but they would eventually. My phone started buzzing with messages from former colleagues, some supportive, some confused, some angry. One message stood out, from a junior analyst I'd mentored 3 years ago. She'd always been sharp, always asked good questions. I wondered if she'd noticed the same discrepancies I had. Her text was simple. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what to do. Thank you for doing what I couldn't. I read it 3 times. Then I replied, you can. Next time you will. The arraignment was packed. Media, investors, former employees, all crowded into the federal courthouse. I sat in the back, anonymous for now. Carter Holbrook stood at the defendant's table in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His lawyer was one of the best in white-collar defense. His face was composed, controlled. But when the judge read the charges securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear. The same fear he'd tried to put in me when he'd had security escort me from the building. The judge set bail at $5 million. Carter's lawyer argued for reduction. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Elizabeth Lawson, argued for detention. The defendant, she said, has demonstrated a pattern of concealing assets. We have evidence he attempted to transfer funds to offshore accounts as recently as last week. He is a flight risk. The judge agreed. Bail denied. Carter was led away in handcuffs. As he passed my row, he looked up. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I nodded. Just slightly, just enough for him to see. He didn't smile this time. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified for 2 days. Every document I'd collected, every pattern I'd identified, every shell company I'd traced. The defense tried to discredit me, called me a disgruntled former employee with an axe to grind, said I'd fabricated evidence after being terminated. Elizabeth Lawson shut that down fast. She introduced my timestamps. Every document dated, every screenshot marked with metadata. Evidence I'd collected while still employed, months before the firing. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, the longest 6 hours of my life. I sat in Adrian's conference room, unable to eat, unable to focus on anything except the silence from the courthouse. Every notification on my phone made my heart jump. When the verdict came, Adrian answered the call. Her face didn't change, professional. Controlled. Trying to catch a clue was torture, the longest few seconds of my life. Then she smiled. Guilty, all counts. I collapsed into a chair. That evening, my family gathered at my parents' house. My mother had cooked my favorite meal. She didn't say much at first, just held my hand across the table. But when our eyes met, something had changed. The worry that had lived in her gaze for so long was gone. In its place, I saw something I hadn't seen before, trust. She believed in me now. She believed in what I could accomplish. Carter Holbrook was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His assets were seized. His professional licenses revoked. His legacy reduced to a cautionary tale in business ethics courses. And me? After this surreal situation, I tried to recover for a while. But of course, the best thing for a workaholic like me was to work. Under the SEC whistleblower program, I received a percentage of the recovered funds, enough to start my own firm, enough to never depend on anyone else's ethics again. Clarity Forensics opened 6 months after the verdict. A small office in Chelsea, just me and 2 associates at first. We specialized in corporate fraud investigation. Companies hired us to find what they didn't want to see. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same skills that made me dangerous to Stratford made me valuable to everyone else. I'd spent 7 years making someone else's company secure. Now I was building my own. The first client came through a referral, a mid-size hedge fund worried about internal controls. They'd read about the Stratford case. They wanted someone who could spot what they might be missing. I found 3 issues in the first week. Nothing criminal, just sloppy practices that could have become criminal if left unchecked. They signed a long-term contract the same month. Word spread. It always does in this industry. Adrienne stopped by the office on opening day. She brought champagne and a framed article from the Financial Chronicle. The headline read, "Whistleblower behind the Stratford scandal founds fraud investigation firm." "You're famous now," she said. "I have a job now." That's what matters. 3 months after the verdict, I received a letter. It was handwritten. I recognized the postmark, Federal Correctional Institution, Pennsylvania. I opened the letter expecting anger, but I found something else. It went on for 3 pages. The pressure of managing a billion-dollar fund, how a small theft turned into many thefts, how he convinced himself he was the victim. But at the end, there was a surprising sentence. A note, "You were the most dangerous controller I ever worked with." I filed the letter away. 6 months later, I received a letter from a young accountant in Chicago. He had read my case. He had seen similar situations at his own company. I called him. I spent 2 hours explaining the process, how to document it, how to protect himself. 6 months later, he filed his own whistleblower complaint. A CFO who thought he was untouchable. He wasn't. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Carter. It was about everyone who needed to know it was possible to speak up. Last month, I passed by Stratford's old building. A new name was on the door now, a new company, new people behind the glass windows. Somewhere in Pennsylvania, I thought of Carter wearing khaki clothes. Instead of a $4,000 suit, I thought of the $47 million he stole, now returned to the pension funds he had plundered. I thought of the young accountant in Chicago who found his courage by listening to my story. Some people think whistleblowing is about revenge. It's not. It's about refusing to be an accomplice. It's about choosing integrity over comfort. It's about understanding that silence is not neutrality, it's acquiescence. If they underestimate you, document everything. Build your case. Follow the evidence. And when the time comes, let the truth speak louder than their silence. Do you agree? Share your thoughts in the comments. The full Purple File playlist's waiting, or discover other color files for more office revenge. See you in the next file.